finding the absolute extrema of this function on this interval. Now, the tricky part about this question is, do you see that's an open interval here, but a closed interval there? That's going to be very important in the end. Be very careful on extremas to look carefully at the interval. All right, so extremas basically we find our first derivative, which we did. We set our first derivative equal to 0, finding critical numbers. Okay. Once we have our critical numbers, we then take and plug our critical numbers and the endpoints, so these two values and the endpoints, I plug them into the original function to see which is the biggest and which are the smallest. All right. Now, by the way, there are more critical numbers in these two, but not on the interval. So you want to look at this interval when finding critical numbers, especially with trig functions. Okay, so we notice we have these two. Since this is the first piece, we're just let it be, and then we need 2 pi. So there's 3 pieces. Boom, boom, boom. So we have to check all of them. Even though pi over 2 is not part of the interval, you need to check it. It's an endpoint. All right, it's a critical number. You still need to check it. Very important. So when I plug in pi over 2 to the original function, not the derivative, be careful on that. Don't plug it into the derivative. The original function, we're going to find out how high or low the values are. When I plug it in, you can tell we get -2. When I plug in 3 pi over 2 to the original function, I get 2. And when I plug in 2 pi, I get 0. Now, if you look at all the values, this is the absolute minimum. This is the absolute maximum. This is neither. So absolute max, absolute min. The problem is, you see right here, I have no absolute min. The reason? This coordinate right here, pi over 2, -2, is not on the interval. It's out of the interval. So we don't technically have an absolute min. You can't go, oh, I'm going to take this one. No, you can't take that one and make it all with an absolute min. Okay, if what would have been the absolute min is not part of the interval, or is not a value, you don't have one. So be careful, it's very tricky. No absolute min, but there is an absolute max at 3 pi over 2, 2. That's the absolute max. So be careful about that. On open intervals or situations where critical numbers, you want to check them all, even if they don't exist. You just got to be careful to check them, edges and critical numbers, and then say if there's an absolute max or min, because sometimes there isn't even one, even though it looks like there is. So just be careful of that. And again, when you're finding absolute max and mins, plug it into the original function, but first find the critical numbers.